We're going to spend more than a little time here with CDP because I want this just to be total low-hanging fruit for you. Whatever they ask you on CDP, you're going to nail it. It's easy to forget it over time. So if it's been a while since you got your CCNA, some of this is going to be a great refresher for you. And I've also got some new info here for you that you probably didn't see in your CCNA studies. Another reason you got to know CDP is that plenty of companies you work for and with, they have clear, concise network maps. People know where the maps are. Every physical connection in the network is shown. All your trunks are shown. Every time something changes as part of their change control process, they go straight to those maps and regularly update them. Some companies don't have that kind of thing. If you can believe such a thing, those companies do exist, believe me. Because a big part of network troubleshooting, really it's playing detective. Sometimes you have to quietly verify what a client has told you, because it's like I tell people breaking into IT, learning how to deal with technology is one thing, learning how to deal with the people in technology is another skill entirely. And just because someone, let's say you go in as a consultant. You go in, there's a guy there who's a regular network admin. There's a feeling out process if you haven't worked with this person before, and that person could feel threatened by you. Oh, they brought somebody in from the outside to do my job, etc. Well, when that kind of thing kicks in, and it does kick in, they could be mistaken about something accidentally. They could be mistaken on purpose about something they're telling you. So you have to be able to quietly verify it. Just because they're telling you, all of our trunks are on Fast Ethernet 0/12 period throughout the lab, throughout the network, they're not necessarily correct. We can use CDP to see what Cisco devices are directly connected to the Cisco device that we're currently working on. And it's a layer 2 protocol. It runs globally and on a per interface level by default on Cisco routers and switches, and it is Cisco proprietary, which is why I was mentioning the word Cisco so often there. That's like 5 times in a minute. It has to be a record. Now, you and I both know that when you have interface level commands and globally configured commands for the same protocol, enabling it, disabling it at those levels, you just know somehow that's going to show up on your exam in some fashion. Now, before we get to those commands, I've got Show CDP here on the board, and I believe I've got it here too as well. It's some important information here to know. This is Show CDP. We're sending our CDP packets every 60 seconds. We are sending a hold time value of 180 seconds, and sending version 2 advertisements is enabled. Now, what would I see if CDP wasn't running? Because generally with the show command, what do we see? We don't see anything. We do show and something or other that isn't running, or there isn't anything to show you. And what does it do? It shows you a blank line, and then it skips down. So let's go ahead and turn CDP off. At the global level, you disable CDP with no CDP run, and you enable it with CDP run. I would know that like the back of my hand. I just have a feeling about that. Now, we've got that going. So let's go ahead and run Show CDP again, and you actually get a message that says CDP is not enabled. It's not going to flash and just show you a blank line. So let's go ahead and turn it right back on. Now, one thing I want to warn you about, you're going to see the global information immediately as soon as you enable or re-enable CDP. You are not going to see your neighbors immediately. I'm going to skip a little bit ahead here. Let's see if our neighbors are showing up yet. Not yet. So I've run Show CDP Neighbor. We have the same neighbors we had a couple of videos back, but they're not showing up yet. This is not going to be instantaneous. I would give it a minute or so before you start any troubleshooting. But again, there's our command, Show CDP, and we know how that looks. And here's an address I think it's a good idea for you to know where CDP is sending its advertisements. It's sending its announcements, I should say, every 60 seconds to the destination MAC address 0100C CC. The hold time is 180 seconds. If you want to change either one of those, use CDP timer and or CDP hold time. And let me go ahead and bring that back up. Let's look at all of our options. Version 2, we're going to talk about version 2 versus version 1 in this video just a bit. You can see the hold time command there, run, which we already used, and timer TLV I wouldn't concern myself with at this point. And the length of time, it's going to be in seconds. It even mentions that in parentheses. I like that. And then we've got CDP timer, rate at which CDP packets are sent in seconds. I like that. It's just kind of an aside. Let's go ahead and run show CDP neighbor again. And there we've got our neighbors cooking again. And let's go with that information. Let's go across the board here. Take a look at the information we've got. The device ID is the ID, the actual host name of that remote device. Local interface, obviously the local interface through which we are directly connected to that Cisco device. Hold time is the number of seconds the local device will retain the contents of the last advertisement received from that host. So with the timers that we looked at earlier, those default settings, when would we know there's a little trouble? What should we not see hold time go beneath? If our starting point, our default is 180 seconds and we're expecting an advertisement every 60 seconds, then you know if this is going below 120 that you might have a little bit of a problem. Now capability, that's the type of device. We've got a table here. I would know a couple of those by heart. RNS, router and switch, no big deal there. And the key is that those devices are capable of routing and switching, which is why we're seeing the R and the S. The I for IGMP, don't sweat that. The platform is going to show you the hardware platform, and the port ID it shows you at the end is the remote port through which the direct connection has been created. Now this command gives you a wealth of info, but it doesn't give you the IP addresses. If you need that, and we saw this a couple of videos earlier, so I'm not going to make it a pop quiz because I know you know the answer. It's detail. And there's a lot of info in here. Some you can use, some you can't, but right at the top it's going to give you, for your first device, there's your device ID and there's the IP address. For our other device, here's the host name I gave it the last time I gave it one, and there's the IP address. So some very helpful information there as far as your IP addressing. Now, you might want to leave CDP on globally, but disable it or re-enable it on a particular interface. Now, at the interface level, we're going to use the commands no CDP enable and CDP enable to get the job done. Keep those straight from CDP run, no CDP run. And we'll go ahead and do that now. Let's go out to, we'll do 03. I know 01 was on the book, but let's do that. And it's no CDP enable. One word. Now we see our hold times, it's still here, it's 154 seconds. Well, just because we disabled CDP on that particular interface, it doesn't mean that our neighbor entry is going to disappear immediately. It's going to disappear when that hold time hits 0. So I'm going to stay here live for a few more seconds and we'll see when those two values differ. And they're starting to tick down a little bit. And there you go. You see all of a sudden router 1's hold time shot up to 179. So we know that a CDP advertisement just came in on that interface. On the other one though, on 0/3 where we disabled it on the switch, that hold time is going to continue to drop, and in 100 seconds it'll be gone. So what I'll do is pause the video here and then pick it back up once that host is gone. All right, we're just about to lose that entry. We've got a hold time down to 16 seconds. 6, 5. Let's wait and see what happens if anything. Hold time just hit 0. And then entry will soon be gone. Now you're not going to get a specific console message, anything like that. You can see now that the entry has been flushed from the table. So I will go ahead and turn it back on. And it'll reappear while we talk about something else. Because the question here is, if CDP gives you a lot of great info, which it does, why is it disabled in so many networks? You'll go in a lot of networks in your career if you're a traveling admin, and the thing is, you go in, it's like CDP is turned off on everything. Well, one issue with it is that it offers no authentication, and it doesn't use any kind of encryption. Everything is sent in clear text. And we could see that by the info we saw in Show CDP Neighbor Detail, we don't necessarily want that information accessible to everyone. Now, the issue with disabling CDP is that many network management tools, including perhaps the tool that you have come to run that day, it uses information gathered by CDP. So really, to minimize the risk of running it, determine where you really need it and where you can do without it, and use the interface levels to make that happen. I would also beg you, just as with debugs, you always turn your debugs off before you leave a client site. If your client had CDP turned off when you came in, it should be that way when you leave. That's just professional. It's also a little CYA, I freely admit, but it's also the professional thing to do. Now, about that version 2, version 1 thing. You know, we saw the CDP commands refer to version 2. We saw a little bit of it. If you were particularly eagle-eyed, you saw it in some of the output of Show CDP Neighbor Detail. And it brings up the musical question, which I will not sing. What happened to CDP version 1? Well, it's still available. And, you know, it's like the enable password. It's being kept around for backward compatibility. Now, CDP version 2, a couple of differences here. It has greatly enhanced error reporting capabilities. Cisco's website terms for this include rapid reporting mechanism or enhanced reporting mechanism. Also, CDP version 2 recognizes the native VLAN concept, which you could see would be a help, where VLAN 1 does not, and CDP can actually report mismatched native VLANs. When you see the mismatched native VLAN up on your screen, you will notice in the middle it's actually a CDP message. Now, should you work on one of these networks that has the nerve to actually have non-Cisco devices in it, you may want to run something called the Link Layer Discovery Protocol. LLDP, it's the vendor-independent equivalent of CDP. It's defined by IEEE 802.1ab and is also fully known as the Station and Media Access Control Connectivity Discovery. I kid you not, that's why we like to call it LLDP instead. Now, when we saw TLV in a couple of the messages, TLVs are not exclusive to LLDP. That just refers to type length value. It's a series of informational messages sent by an LLDP-enabled device. There's one particularly helpful extension I want to mention too for LLDP. It's called LLDP for Media Endpoint Devices, LLDP Med, and it comes into play when voice over IP is in use. And according to Cisco's website, LLDP Med is specified to operate only between endpoint devices such as IP phones and network connectivity devices such as switches, so it does have a limited location for use. CDP, though, it does have some advantages. It carries some information that LLDP does not have. That includes MTU size, it includes VTP information, the VLAN trunking protocol, and IP network prefix support for our old frenemy on-demand routing, ODR. Now, on the website where you're watching this video, I'm going to put this link right next to the description so you can click it if you want to. It's a PDF, has a lot of helpful information comparing LLDP Med and CDP. It is not required reading for your switch exam. It's not required reading at all, but I do recommend it for greater understanding of LLDP Med in particular. I think it's worth a glance for you. And like I said, I will definitely make a point of putting this PDF link in the description there on the video site you're watching this course on. The very next video, obviously, we're going to talk about Telnet versus SSH, the difference between the two, and differences between the two, I should say, and we'll chat about that on the next video. See you there.